Chapter 1 of Zhang Henshui is a family of golden pinks, a leisurely trip on the road and a fall from the whip shocks the plain girl, a small banter before the steps and the play of Zhao Huan with power. But it is said that the summer palace outside Zizhemen in Beijing is a relic left by the Qing dynasty generation. It is said that the construction fee for the garden was originally used to pay for the navy. Using the money from the navy to build a garden will naturally appear great. In the former Qing dynasty, it was only for 1 or 2 people, the emperor and the empress dowager, to enjoy themselves there. Up to now, it is nothing more than Liuxi's forbidden city, the so-called Orioles of the nation. Not only can everyone go there for fun, but those who go there must also pay homage to the sunset and the fragrant grass. Spring is late in the north, and elms and poplars have late leaves. It is not until the end of March or the beginning of April that the flowers bloom. At that time, Wanshu Mountain was full of peaks and greenery, Kunming Lake was full of spring water and green waves, and the Summer Palace and the adjacent Zishan Mountain had entered a golden age. Bingers have always been very particular about eating, drinking, and having fun. How can we not visit a place like this? So in March and April, every time the weather is nice and sunny, the 2 main roads leading to Zhongshan and Badaku outside Zizhemen are really busy with traffic. And there are countless people wearing fragrant clothes and beautiful people. In late March of this year, the weather was fine and mild, and there was an endless stream of tourists going out of Zizhemen every day. Cars, carriages, rickshaws, and donkeys came and went, making it very lively. But some wealthy men certainly don't like riding in horse-drawn carriages or rickshaws. I'm tired of sitting in the car again. As for the donkey, I think it is too small. The first thing he didn't want to accept was that the whip given by the donkey driver was so dirty that people didn't dare to pick it up. There is a classmate who feeds a few good horses at home. Occasionally he is happy to go out of town for a horse ride. In this bright springtime, wearing a light shirt and hat, whipping among the flowers and under the willows, witnessing the scene of horses neighing and fragrant grass, how happy it is. Among this group of young men, there is a young master named Jin who is very popular. He only has a Chinese character and is named Yanxi. He is only 18 years old now. In the ranking of brothers, he is the 4th, and if the sisters and brothers are ranked together, he is the 7th, so his servants all call him 7th Master. His father is the current Prime Minister and the General Director of a bank. The money at home flows in and out like water every day. Therefore, except for studying, nothing was unsatisfactory for him. Because the weather was very good that day, he got up early, at around 9 o'clock. After eating some snacks at home, I called 4 footmen, Li Fu, Zhang Shun, Jin Rong and Jin Gi, prepared 5 horses, and the 5 masters and servants gathered around them and walked out of Zizhemen towards the summer palace. Yanxi took off his floral blue satin mandarin jacket and threw it to the waiter. He was wearing only a royal blue fine silk camel velvet robe. He rolled up the 2 sleeves slightly, revealing the short green spring silk jacket underneath. The right hand is holding the horse's reins, and the left hand is holding a Jiangju silk snow whip. With 2 patent leather shoes, he stepped on the stirrups, clamped the horse's belly, raised his whip, and the jade dragon and white horse he was riding on, lifted up its 4 hooves on the road, and galloped westward like flying. Jin Rong, who was behind, rode up on his horse, shouting, "My young master, don't run away. This fall is not for fun." When he said that, the 3 horses behind him also caught up. The dust on the road was lifted up by the horses' hooves and rolled over people's heads. Yanxi ran a full 5 miles. Feeling that it was a bit difficult, he reined in the horse. The 4 horses had already crossed their heads, turned around, and blocked the way. Yanxi took out a snowflake silk handkerchief from under his camel hair robe, wiped the sweat from his face, and said with a smile, "What are you doing?" Jin Rong said, "There are many people on the road today, so I can't run. It's not good if you fall. It's not good for others, don't you think?" Yanxi said with a smile, "You are all good people? You almost hit the patrolman when you were learning to drive a car the day before yesterday." Jin Rong said with a smile, "No. My ability to ride a horse is about the same as my ability to drive, so I'd better be careful. If Gao Xingqiu gets into trouble, even if he's not afraid, it will be very disappointing." Yanxi said, "That sounds like a sentence." Li Fu said, "Then let's go in front." As he said, the 4 horses turned around and walked ahead. Yanxi loosened the reins of the horse and followed slowly. This is a road 2 or 3 feet wide, with willow trees on both sides, hanging down in long strips, draping over people and horses. It was getting a bit hot during the Yanxi horse racing, and 1 or 2 gusts of east wind blew under the willow trees, bringing some fragrance to my face, and I couldn't help but feel refreshed all over. Their horses were walking downwind, and in the midst of the fragrance, they felt that there was a burst of orchid and musk fragrance when they were upwind. Yanxi saw the spring scenery on the street on horseback and couldn't help but appreciate this fragrance. Yanxi felt very strange, thinking, this is not like going to the wild, but like entering someone's hair-combing room. While riding the horse slowly, he was lost in thought on the horse. The aroma became stronger and stronger. Occasionally, when I turned around, I saw a row of 4 rubber trucks, with 4 female students, aged 17 or 18, sitting on them, chasing after them. Yanxi suddenly realized that the strong fragrance of the powder came from them. At this moment, 3 of the 4 rubber carts had already passed the horse's head. The last one was walking side by side with Yanxi's horse. Yanxi's eyes looked over there unconsciously. The woman was seen wearing Rui bun, with a goose yellow velvet rope coiled inside the bun, which made her look even more shining. She was wearing a blue dress with thin white braids rolled around her body. A veil of the color of the water of the West Lake was draped around her neck, fluttering in the wind. Yanxi grew up among the gold powder, and although it was accustomed to leaning against red and greenery, such simple decorations were rare. He didn't look at it, but after looking at it, he didn't feel like looking at it again. I saw that the snow-white face was slightly red, with a sparse black streak extending to the tip of her eyebrows, and a pair of flexible eyes. It was obvious at a glance that she was a smart girl. Yanxi looked at it again and again, fearing that others would notice it, so he urged the horse to walk a few steps faster, then a few steps slower, back and forth, never letting the car get too far away. The car went quickly and the horse went slowly, so that Yanxi forgot where he was. The car in front suddenly stopped to let the car pass, and the cars following behind also stopped. When Yanxi saw the car stopped, his horse also stopped unconsciously. The beautiful woman tilted her head and was looking at the scenery. Here, she suddenly lowered her head and smiled. She didn't have time to pull out the handkerchief, so she covered her mouth with the veil fluttering in the wind. As she smiled, her eyes, which were like lightning, glanced this way again. Along the way, Yanxi chased people, but they didn't realize it. At this time, when people looked at him, he felt a little embarrassed. Suddenly he looked down and realized. It turned out that the horsewhip he was holding had slipped out of his hand at some point and had fallen to the ground. Maybe that's why people laugh. I have to go down and pick up the riding whip. I'm really embarrassed. Why don't you pick it up? That riding whip is my favorite thing, and I really can't bear to throw it away. He couldn't help but hesitate on the horse. Jin Rong and his party of 4 horses were in front of him. Who knows? Just keep walking. Jin Rong turned around and saw that Yanxi was no longer there. He was startled. He turned his horse's head and put his foot in the stirrup. When he looked up, he saw Yanxi reining in his horse and stopping under the shade of a willow tree. Jin Rong added a riding crop and quickly urged the horse to run back. Then he asked, Master Qi, what are you doing? Yanxi smiled and said, it's good that you're here. My horse's whip fell to the ground, so you can pick it up for me. Jin Rong jumped off the horse. Seriously, go. Pick up the riding whip and give it to Yanxi. As soon as he took the riding whip, he seemed to have remembered something. He didn't wait for Jin Rong to get on the horse, hit the horse and ran away first. Jin Rong chased after him, shouting, My Qi, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Yanxi's horse ran for about half a mile, then stopped, and slowly started again. Get up and walk. Jin Rong followed behind and stretched out his hand to scratch his hair. I thought to myself, this is a bit strange. I wonder what is really wrong with him. He didn't dare to ask Yanxi what happened, so he could only follow behind in confusion. After walking a little further, I saw a few rickshaws chasing after me, and there were a few women who looked like green onions in the cars. Jin Rong suddenly realized it and thought, I am making stupid ideas again. No wonder I can't live without these cars all the time. Let me look at him and see who I am paying attention to. When I thought like this, my eyes looked towards those cars. He knew it when he saw Yanxi's eyes fixed on the woman in green. But I have a group of 5 horses, and I always look at other people's cars like FLIs. This kind of look is a bit ugly. Then he deliberately caught up with the whip, walked side by side with Yanxi's horse, and glanced at Yanxi. In just this moment, the horse has already stepped forward. Yanxi understood and caught up. Jin Rong hit the horse and just ran forward. Yanxi shouted from behind, "Jin Rong, do you want me to scold you? Okay. What are you trying to do?" Jin Rong looked back and saw that the rickshaw was far away. Then he smiled and said, "Master Qi, are you still scolding me for being naughty?" Jin Yanxi smiled and said, "Why can't I scold you for being naughty?" Jin Rong said, "My lord, you want me to say it out and stare up and down. She really doesn't look like that." Fu smiled again. "If you really want to see her, you can see her every day for 360 years. Why chase her on the road?" Yanxi said with a smile, "I see. Fu, you're talking nonsense. Be careful and I'll whip you." Jin Rong said, "I mean well. Master Qi said that, so I won't say anything." Seeing that there was something wrong in his words, Yanxi slapped his horse forward, closely side by side. He smiled and said, "What do you mean by good intentions?" Jin Rong said, "Master Qi wants to whip me. What else can I say? Do you want me to be beaten if nothing happens?" When Jingi and the other three heard this, everyone immediately laughed. Yanxi said, "You wronged me, and I didn't know it yet?" Jin Rong said, "How dare I wrong you? I go out on the street every day and I always run into that person. I know where she lives." Yanxi said. He smiled and said, "This shows that you are talking nonsense. You don't know her, and she doesn't know you. It's okay. Out of thin air. How can you pay attention to other people's actions?" Jin Rong said with a smile, "Let me ask you, do you think that other people are doing it? Isn't it just out of thin air? Everyone likes to see beautiful people. When a dog sees such a flower like lady walking on the street, it will wag its tail, not to mention that I am still a human being." Yanxi smiled and said, "Stop chewing maggots. Do you know that?" Jin Rong said, "Don't be busy, listen to me. Didn't Master Qi come up with a trick this time, and want to eat crab shell yellow sesame cakes? I am always afraid that what others buy is not to your liking, so I always buy it myself. Going to Champelu every morning is a good job for you to pick on Jin Rong. Stop talking nonsense." Jin Rong said, "When I go to buy sesame cakes every day, I always meet her coming back from school. Almost all the time. One day she came back early. I was in a place and saw her walking into a house. I guess that it's her home." Yanxi said, "If she goes in, it's not necessarily her home. Could it be the home of her relatives and friends?" Jin Rong said, "I said the same thing, but I met her twice in the future." Yanxi said, "Where is it?" Jin Rong said with a smile, "It's not far from our home anyway." Yanxi said, "It's not far from our home in Beijing. What you said is too unreliable." Jin Rong said, "I will never wrong you. When I go back, I will take you to her door. I guarantee that you will be happy. It would be no fun to say it first." Yanxi said, "That will make it easier. If you don't take me with you, then I'll settle the score with you again." Jin Rong said with a smile, "I also have a condition, but I can't stare at people on the road. If I stare at them again, I won't dare to say anything." Seeing that he was honest, Yanxi agreed with a smile. The master and servant talked all the way, and they didn't realize they had passed Hadian. Zhang Shen said, "Master Qi, we went to the summer palace the day before yesterday. Are we going again today?" Yanxi hesitated on the horse and did not say anything yet. Li Fu said with a smile, "You are a person who doesn't know how to judge the wind. You have to go in for a walk today." Zhang Shen said with a smile, "Then, let's all wait outside and let Master Qi stay alone. Just walk slowly." Yanxi laughed and scolded, "You bastards are making fun of me." Jingi said, "Master Qi, don't scold me in a group. I don't dare to say anything." Master and Servant 5. They arrived at the summer palace chatting and laughing happily, tied their horses under a tree, and 5 of them bought tickets to enter. Yanxi thought to herself that those female students must be here to visit the summer palace. So come in beforehand and wait here. Unexpectedly, after waiting for a long time, there was no sign at all. I am afraid that they have gone all the way to Zhongshan. Listless, he kept going home with 4 servants. As soon as he arrived at the gate, he saw a car parked there. His eldest sister-in-law Wu Paifeng, third sister-in-law Wang Yufan, and third aunt Kui all got out of the car. When Kui saw Yanxi getting off the horse, she smiled and said, "You have nothing to do, so you go out of town to ride horses again? Look, Your face is so red from the sun. What's the big deal? If your white sister sees it later, she will complain for a long time. Yanxi handed the whip to Jin Rong and went in with them. He asked, "Where did you come from?" Pai Feng smiled and said, "Aunt Kui won money playing poker last night, and we asked her to treat us." Yanxi asked, "Are we going to a restaurant?" Pai Feng said, "No. We booked 2 rooms at Chunming Stage and watched 2 plays." Yanxi said, "There were only 3 of us, but they booked 2 rooms." Aunt Kui said, "They are using the money I won as a tile. I said we should book 1 room, but they said, there are many people who want to go." Later, after the room was booked, we looked east and west, but couldn't find anyone. Yanxi paused and was about to speak when Wang Yufan in front of him cried out. She turned around with a red face and wanted to complain to him, but then she couldn't help laughing, and said, "Seventh brother, look, you stepped on my new serge cape today, and it got dirty." As she said this, she held the front of her rose-purple cape with both hands and turned her head to look at her heels. Yanxi looked and saw a footprint on the edge of the rhinestone-lined black silk braid. Yanxi saw it and felt very sorry. He quickly squatted down to brush off the dust for his 3rd sister-in-law. Wang Yufan turned around, stepped forward, and said with a smile, "I don't deserve it." Everyone laughed and walked into the upper room. The old maids in each room had already come forward to take over their cloaks and bags. Yanxi was about to go back to his study, but Aunt Kui grabbed him and said, "I have something to discuss with you." Yanxi said, "What is it?" Aunt Kui said, "I heard that you have already got a box ticket for the charity play on the big stage. Can you give it to me?" "Okay." Yanxi said, "I thought it was something important. Just for this? Why give it away? I can give it to you." Aunt Kui said, "You leave it with you. I will take it myself. If it is transferred, I will have no share." Yanxi agreed and went out. When he returned to the study, Jin Rong was cleaning his desk for him. Jin Rong looked around and saw that no one was in the room. He smiled and said, "Seventh master, it's better if you don't read. If you read and leave them everywhere, if someone comes here and sees them, it will be bad for everyone." Yanxi said, "What's the big deal? Those are just a few irrelevant novels. Have those tabloids been delivered? I haven't read them for 2 days." Jin Rong said, "How could they not be delivered? I've kept them. I'll take them out and read them before I go to bed tonight." Yanxi smiled and said, "You said you knew the girl's family. You can tell me now." Jin Rong said, "I dare not say." Yanxi said, "Why don't you say it?" Jin Rong smiled and said, "I can't bear the consequences if Miss Bai finds out in the future." Yanxi said, "How can we let them know what we did? Just tell me. I guarantee that nothing will happen." Jin Rong smiled and said hesitantly, "I'm sorry. What I said on the road was all nonsense." As he said that, he greeted Yanxi. Yanxi was very unhappy and said with a stern face, "Why are you blaming me?" Jin Rong said, "You don't know. When you saw her car on the road, she was already angry. I was afraid that if I followed her, there would be trouble." Yanxi said, "I don't care. You must find her home. If you can't find it, don't see me." After saying that, he took a magazine from the table and read it by himself, ignoring Jin Rong. Seeing that Yanxi was really angry, Jin Rong didn't dare to say anything. After finishing the work, he left. He discussed with several servants and said, "Isn't this a difficult task? Beijing is such a big place. Where can I find this person?" Everyone said, "Who told you to lie so well? It seems true." Jin Rong also felt that he couldn't explain the task, and he was scared and didn't dare to see Yanxi for 2 or 3 days. Fortunately, Yanxi had many places to play, and after 2 or 3 days, he let it go. Seeing that he had forgotten about it, Jin Rong felt relieved. As luck would have it, on that day, Jin Rong went to the Huguo Temple flower factory to buy flowers. He ran into the female student who had bought a few pots of flowers and hired a car on the street. The place they were talking about was the west end of Luohua Hutong. Jin Rong was happier than when he was a student and had to answer several difficult questions. He let her car go and hired a car to follow. When they arrived at the place, the female student's car stopped and knocked at a small black door. Jin Rong's car drove all the way past the west entrance. He paid the fare and got off. He pretended to look for someone and counted the house numbers one by one. When he counted to the small black door, the house number was No. 12. There was a white wooden board on the door with the words Leng written on it. The door was half open. Looking outside the door, he saw a small courtyard inside. However, behind the courtyard, there were dense trees, which seemed to be a garden of someone's family. While looking here, he saw the female student flash in the courtyard again. This can be concluded that she lives here. Jin Rong saw it all, went back home, found Yanxi in the upper room, and exchanged glances with him. Yanxi understood, and followed him to the study. Jin Rong smiled and said, "Seventh Master, I found the person you were looking for." Yanxi said, "Who am I looking for?" Jin Rong smiled and said, "Someone that Seventh Master is very concerned about." Yanxi said, "Who am I concerned about? I don't understand what you are saying anymore." Jin Rong said, "Seventh Master, have you forgotten everything? What about the person you saw in Hadian that day?" Yanxi smiled and said, "Oh, I was wondering who you were talking about, but it turned out you were talking about her. Where did you find her? Are you talking nonsense again?" Jin Rong said, "Unless you are really brave, do you dare to lie?" He repeated what he said about the female student he met in Huguo Temple. He smiled again, and said, "Not only did you find out where she is, but you also know her last name is Leng." Jin Rong's words stirred up Yanxi's worries. Thinking of the girl in plain makeup floating in the car under the shade of the willow tree that day, she seemed to be right in front of him, and he couldn't help but smile. Then he said to Jin Rong, "I don't believe whether what you said is true or not. Let me investigate and confirm it first." Jin Rong smiled and said, "If the investigation is true, will there be a reward?" Jin Yanxi said, "Yes, I will give you a ham." Although Jin Yanxi said this, he was happy in his heart. He couldn't wait until the next day, and immediately changed into a suit, matched with a bright red bow tie, and picked a pair of black leather shoes to wear. He was holding a soft rattan cane in his hand, and was about to go out, but suddenly remembered that he hadn't put on a hat. He was wearing a dark green suit, so he should also wear a dark green hat. He remembered that this hat was left in the upper room when he came back from watching horse racing with them 2 days ago. He didn't know which sister-in-law's room it was left in, so he went to Wu Paifeng first. Just as he was about to reach the moon gate, he saw his eldest sister-in-law's maid Zhao Lian carrying a few pots of orchids, basking in the sun on the stone steps outside the corridor, and wiping the porcelain pots with a wet towel. When she looked up, she saw Yanxi leaning out, half of his body, stretching and shrinking, and she couldn't help but smile. Yanxi nodded to her, waved his hand, and asked her to come over. Zhao Lian threw away her handkerchief, ran over, and turned one hand to touch the end of her braid. She smiled and said, "If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you like this?" Jin Yanxi saw that she was wearing a gray cloth dress, with a 60% old blue satin waistcoat tightly put on the outside, and a thick layer of black bangs, which made her face look even whiter. So she smiled and said, "This waistcoat is very beautiful." Zhao Lian said, "What's beautiful?" "This is a reward from the sixth lady. It was a fashionable thing 2 or 3 years ago, and now it has become an antique." Jin Yanxi said, "But it fits you very well." Zhao Lian said, "Is that what you want me to say?" Jin Yanxi smiled and said, "The eldest young lady said that you should serve me. Did you hear that?" Zhao Lian spat at him slightly, turned around and ran away. Yanxi knocked on the moon door with his cane, laughing. Wu Paifeng called out through the glass window, "Isn't that Lucky?" Yanxi walked into the moon door and said, "Sister-in-law, it's me." Paifeng said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you sneaking around?" As she spoke, Paifeng had already walked out. Zhao Lian lowered her head and wiped the flower pots. Her ears were all red. Paifeng was on the corridor. Yanxi was standing under the corridor. Paifeng smiled with her hands covering her mouth, and Yanxi also forced a smile. Then he asked, "Did I leave the dark green felt hat I wore for the first time here?" Paifeng smiled and said, "Don't say that as soon as possible. Why do you wear a green hat, young man?" Jin Yanxi said, "There are many people wearing green hats now." Paifeng knew that he was stunned by his words, so she deliberately said to him, "Because there are so many people wearing green hats, do you have to wear one too?" Yanxi smiled and said, "You are like wearing glasses to fix bowls, and you are looking for trouble when there is nothing to do." Paifeng smiled and said, "Listen, you said something wrong, but you still accused me of looking for trouble." Yanxi said, "Well, you tell me the hat is not here?" Paifeng said, "You are always like this." Said, "Let her wait for you first, and clean up clothes and socks." Zhao Li said, "Grandma, the younger grandma. Does it mean?" Yanxi said, is the hat here? Is not here? Pai Feng said, the hat is not. There is one of the horse gowns throwing it with me. You can find it elsewhere. Yanxi thought. There was no one. Turning a corner, I saw Zhao Lion holding a small stick and picking the spider web on the dwarf cypress tree. The cypress trees were planted in rows like a fence. Jin Yanxi was on this side and Zhao Lion was on the other side. Zhao Lion saw Jin Yanxi coming and said, what hat are you looking for? Jin Yanxi said, didn't I tell you just now? Didn't you hear me? You want me to say I'm looking for a green hat again? Zhao Lion smiled and said, I won't take advantage of you. As she spoke, she pointed at Jin Yanxi's clothes with the stick and asked, is it the same color as this one? Jin Yanxi said, yes. Did you see it? Zhao Lion said, your memory is so bad. Didn't Miss Bai ask you to play poker that day when you were wearing clothes and leaving, and put away the hat? Jin Yanxi said, oh, yes. Miss Bai took it. Do you know where she put it? Zhao Lion said, where did she put it? She just threw it on the chair. I know you bought it, and I heard it cost more than 20 yuans. I was afraid I would drop it, so I picked it up and sent it to your room. Yanxi said, is it true? Zhao Lian said, why not? It's on the second hat rack in the bathroom behind your room. Go and have a look. Jin Yanxi smiled and said, thank you very much. Zhao Lian poked Yanxi with the small stick in her hand and said with a smile, you have the worst mouth, messy and like to talk nonsense. Yanxi smiled and said, what am I saying about you? As he said that, Yanxi took a step forward to grab her hand and snatch her stick. Zhao Lian shrank back, and there was a row of small cypress trees between them, so Yanxi had no way to catch her. Zhao Lian stamped her feet, raised her eyebrows, pouted, and said, don't make trouble. People will see the joke. Yanxi saw that he couldn't catch her, so he ran along the small cypress fence and was about to go through the small door to twist Zhao Lian. Seeing this, Zhao Lian turned around and ran. When Yanxi ran to the cypress tree, Zhao Lian had already run across the corridor. She nodded and smiled at Jin Yanxi from a distance, saying, come here, come here. Jin Yanxi smiled and ran forward. Behind Zhao Lian was a hall door. She held the door with her hand, shrank back, and closed the door. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.